Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you all for joining us and welcome to this Community IT webinar. Is your nonprofit a learning organization? And it's a conversation with my friend Karen Graham. So my name is Carolyn Woodard. I am the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'll be the moderator today.
All right. Thanks for hosting me today and having this conversation together.
So we have a question from David about selecting the best learning management systems and getting help setting them up, which is our next topic, the tools for learning management. So we put in the bullets a couple of the different categories of tools that we were thinking about. And the first one is a learning management system. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that is, that category?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of software that is designed to provide or to, be a container for self-paced learning. And so it's software that will often have the ability to show videos and provide maybe downloadable materials or materials you can read on a screen. It might have quizzes. It might have some tracking of learners so that they can indicate, when they're completing something or so that you're able to kind of monitor their learning and their progress. And some organizations will use this internally for employees. Others will provide it for external people. So, for example, if you're a health organization and you want to provide education about a particular disease, like living with that disease or supporting a family member with that disease or whatever, you might deploy a learning management system to kind of hold all the training materials. And a few examples of some that I've used are Tavuti, Decebo or Decibo, depending if you're Italian, is another one that I've played with a little bit. And I mean, there's a bunch of different ones. Those are just two off the top of my head that are kind of relatively lightweight ones that are used by a lot of nonprofit organizations. If you have kids, you've probably experienced some of these things that are used by schools. And so the one thing I'll say about those tools is that they are quite expensive, and some of the things to think about when you're even thinking about whether you need this tool or not are like, to what degree do you really need to be able to track things versus just being able to provide the materials. If you're just looking for a place to provide the materials, then maybe if you have SharePoint or Teams or something like that might be a good enough container where you can just organize materials into like a nice visual format and make them available to people.
And that was our second point here, was that there's this other category of kind of learning tools, which is more like a library or a repository where the things that you have learned reside. And then people can access them kind of as and when they want to, rather than a learning system, which is like a classroom, like you do these things in this order and then you get a certificate at the end. And I think that, it's so exciting right now. AI search is going to help a lot of organizations, pull some of those resources out of obscurity, where maybe they're way down in somebody's file system in SharePoint, but now you're going to be able to search a little bit more easily and share those resources. And I'm wondering, with these first two categories, the learning management system and the repository system, would you say that it's usually necessary to have a curator? Like, can these systems just exist on their own and like run themselves indefinitely? Or do you really need to have somebody managing, massaging, and or organizing these resources?
I think you do. If you really want to be the most effective, if you're taking learning and knowledge management really seriously, it's probably worth designating someone with some responsibility for monitoring those things and kind of cleaning them up and enforcing guidelines and that sort of thing. But there are some things you can do in the tools themselves to, I mean, in some cases, to enforce like naming conventions or metadata, things like that. And for those people who maybe aren't as technical, like I think metadata in the Microsoft universe, it's not quite as easy to access or to deploy in the Google stack. But in Microsoft, you can use metadata to be able to sort things in a lot of different ways. Instead of just a folder hierarchy, you might also be able to group things by a tag or some other kind of information that you add to that file. And so that can be a useful way to sort things, especially when you know what you're looking for. Um, the the challenge is if you don't know what you're looking for and you just want to be able to sort of discover, browse around and kind of see what's there, um, then these tools don't always make that easy. And but what I've found is really promising is applying AI to your own files. And I know you can do that now in SharePoint and a lot of the different Microsoft tools, including like Viva Goals. Um, it'll like it has kind of a built-in AI there. So you can ask your system a question like, look at my own library of files and summarize all the work that my organization has done on bike rapid transit in the Southern Hemisphere. And it'll give you that with references to specific files and documents that it is learning this from. And so stuff like that I think is really promising for the future of learning and discovery. Same thing with people's profiles. You can set up um, profiles on your system of employees that include their areas of expertise, past projects they've worked on, and kind of use that to find somebody that you can ask, because that's really what people are more likely to do. If you think about how people learn when they're looking for a briefing on a topic or they're looking for expertise on something, they're more likely to chat or pick up the phone and call somebody they know and ask about it than they are to kind of try to find it self-serve. So I love
Yeah.
tools that make it easier for people to do that.
Yeah, and I think the AI tools, like they're not there yet, or they're getting there. I think a year from now, we're going to be like, wow, this AI tool can really search this just specific thing and give me
Yeah.
really good information. So I think if you're frustrated with AI searches right now, just like hang tight, they're going to keep getting better.
Yeah.
And then just quickly, I want to just talk about this last category that we talked
Mhm.
about, which is the communication project management tools, which kind of help you do this piece that we're talking about is how do you find the information that you need when you need it in the place that you need it. And so some of these tools can help you manage that project or store something that has to do with that project, then it's associated with like a deadline or dependencies. So this part of this grant process can't happen until this person okays this piece of the finance or, like those types of tools that can help you. I mean, it is a kind of knowledge management or learning management where you don't have to constantly ask that person, did you do this piece that I need before I can do my piece? You can just look in the tool and see that it's been checked off.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that's more about like coordinating work really than it is about learning, I think, but they're adjacent to each
yeah.
other. For use of project management tools, one thing I love to see, but I don't often see, is if there's like, say you have a template that you use every time you set up a new project, or even if it's just kind of in your head, you set up a new project. If you build right into it that there's going to be a debrief at the end, there's going to be a chance for reflection and looking back on what did we learn from this project? What might we have done differently? Had we known what we know now? Like those kinds of learning organization questions, if they're baked right into the project management tool as like a task that is assigned to somebody to make sure that happens, um, that's that's really strong for making sure it does happen.
That is a perfect segue to our next slide, which is all about the practices that support being a learning organization.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, we've got a couple of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and hold those just for a minute because we answered some of them, but I want to make sure that we, get to that Q&A slide. So for example, having a formal knowledge management strategy, what is that?
I so I had to create a knowledge management strategy with one of my clients recently, and I had never done that before, honestly. And so I asked around a little bit in some groups that I'm part of, some networks that I belong to. Like, does anybody have an example of a knowledge management strategy they can share? And I didn't come up with any examples from those groups. And then I searched the internet, like sample knowledge management strategy documents, whatever. And I found a few, but I didn't think they were very useful. So I just made something up. But I did find actually that an AI tool was pretty helpful with like asking this AI tool, what should be the components of a knowledge management strategy? What should this include? There was also a good article, which I wish I had the link to that handy. I don't, but there was an article that kind of outlined like what are the components of knowledge management. And we were talking about that a little bit before, like capturing the knowledge, discovery, being able to like search and find something, but also being able to explore things like that. And so the knowledge management strategy that we developed had that motto, when one person learns something, the whole organization gets smarter. But then it also included some components like what are the kinds of tools that we will use to support this? In that case, it was SharePoint and Planner, and they're on Microsoft, obviously. From if you're familiar with those products, you'll know. And so we named some tools that were going to be used, and we also talked about some processes, such as the formal way that they do project management, having a review at the end of every project to reflect back. Communities of practice are another key part of that organization's knowledge management strategy. They're a global organization with about 150 employees, and so they have communities of practice that go across all regions and bring together all the people that work on a certain topic. And they talk about what are the best practices, what are we learning about this, what did they do in Mexico that maybe we can implement in India, that sort of thing. So those are the kinds of things that I would hope to see in any organization strategy. And I mean, I hope that more organizations will start being a little more deliberate about that, because it is a strategic advantage.
Yeah, I think we can put some of those points in the transcript. So we'll follow up on that a little bit. And I love what you said about the communities of practice, or just having kind of formalizing what we were saying earlier about you want to go talk to the person who knows about that thing and just ask them because you have a specific question and they know all about that topic. And so they'll be able to search their own, internal files and come up with the answer that you're looking for. And if you formalize that in bringing groups of people together that have similar roles or similar experiences and that can share, like we did a little group about Copilot. So of our clients, we had a few that had already implemented Copilot, and we had a bunch of others who were thinking about it. And so getting them to share, kind of the early adopters sharing some of their best practices and what they had learned was really important to the group. So I love that you said that having postmortems, having a review built into, like midway, maybe at the end of the project. I loved something else you said earlier, which was not shaming failures. And you said it a little bit earlier too about treating mistakes as an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so important
Yeah,
culturally.
there's been a lot of talk about that. I think there's some big TED talk about it, and I've heard a lot of talk among nonprofit leaders about this concept. And so that won't be new to anybody, right? But maybe connecting that idea to being a learning organization overall is something that's a little different twist on it.
And something to talk to your funders about as well. Like, are you partnering with a funder who is going to give you the opportunity to make some mistakes and learn from them? Or are you
Hopefully you are.
partnering with a funder that is like, I need you to have reached 500,000 more children this year or else or whatever? Budgeting for professional development. I mean, that's again part of making it a priority. I loved what you said about validating curiosity and exploration and making space for learning and just embracing that, making a day, a month for it or a quarter. I love the idea of going to the library together. That's just wonderful.
Yeah. Like because this is like a lot of people are on this webinar because they're connected with community IT because of technology support. And so I want to think about the connection between innovation and security and other kinds of like control. This is a I don't know if it's exactly a trade-off or it feels like maybe it's a false dichotomy, but there are some points where those things rub up against each other. If you're trying to be a nimble organization that does a lot of experimentation and lets people follow their curiosity, then that suggests maybe you want to loosen some controls and, for example, allow people to download software without going through a big permissioning process and approval. But yet there's also, as probably most of you know, there's like heightened concerns about cybersecurity, and there are also a lot of efficiencies that come from an organization having centralized management of technology. And it can be more cost effective to manage an organization that way rather than letting everybody kind of do their own thing. And so that's something that is a conversation that I think leadership teams and even boards of directors should be having about like what are the trade-offs here and what's our organization's stance on this. And that's a part of technology strategy that a lot of times when people talk about technology strategy, what they really mean is like how many computers are we going to buy next year, and that sort of thing. It stays actually on a more tactical level, but I think technology strategy should also be at this level of like, what kind of organization do we want to be? What kind of culture do we want to create? And how do our technology policies and practices help or hinder that?
Yeah, imagining the future, and then it makes it easier to get there. You see how your little steps are going to lead up to where you want to be
Yeah.
5 years from now. But that is so true. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in an AI discussion recently where someone has said, just try it, just start using it.
Mm-hmm.
And the IT guys, like cybersecurity guys, are like, no, don't do that. Hold up, like you're
Yeah.
sharing your institutional knowledge with a public on a public site or what have you. So it's definitely there's a tension there. So yeah, we have a few minutes for some questions, and we got some good ones in the chat. So I just wanted to ask
Good.
you, someone asked, well, we talked about this a little bit, but can community IT assist with selecting the best learning management system and help setting it up? So, as I said earlier, for our clients, we do that. But I think, Karen, you are more on the expertise on the selection side of things.
Yeah,
So,
that is something that I've guided a couple of organizations through. And so that's something that I could talk with you about if you're not already working with community IT for
yeah,
support.
no.
Yeah.
And even if you are, it may be the sort of thing that we would want to call in somebody who has a
Yeah.
lot of expertise with that landscape and the selection of the
Mm-hmm.
specific tools that you're looking at.
Yeah.
And then we had some other two great questions from Sarah about specific examples on how to use tools to manage learning resources like news articles, white papers, etc. They are using Teams and SharePoint and still have not found a successful way to maintain the information. And additionally, they're looking for a way to create a digest for
Mm-hmm.
program officers that would surface that relevant information from like multiple newsletters that they're getting in their topic area. Do you know of is there an easy way to pull that information and create a newsletter that goes out that has those links and articles in it? Or is that something
Yeah.
that you just have to curate yourself?
I want that. Like, I
I
want
know, right?
robots to find, like, Karen, here's your daily briefing. This is all the stuff that's going on in your field that you need to know today, and kind of compile the headlines and do it for me. I haven't found that tool yet. Um, I mean, I know there are things you can subscribe to. Like Pocket is one that I've used sometimes where I follow certain topics and it'll kind of round up like the best articles about change management related to technology, and it'll send that to my inbox from time to time. So um, I've got to believe that there's something out there that is good at that. There's also the Google Alerts. Is that it's kind of changed how it works over the last few years, and I'm not currently using it, so I can't speak very very intelligently to the details. But Google Alerts is another way that I know some people have tried to follow certain topics and get alerted of changes. I don't know if that like quite addresses that issue.
Helpful, yeah. I'm sorry. I think we have some good suggestions. I was also going to say that in Virginia, I subscribe to a newsletter
Mm-hmm.
that pulls articles from different resources, based on that they're all about Virginia politics.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be something if you haven't looked in like the news, if you haven't Googled it with a news aspect, maybe newspaper news sources, there may be some tool there that you could use for your own newsletter type of a
Yeah.
thing. So
Maybe other
um,
people want to weigh in the chat too,
yeah,
if
if
you've got a
anybody
favorite
has a,
method to do this.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Ben.
Yeah,
Ben's
Google
got an
Alerts
idea.
and Zapier and ChatGPT can be effective, but it's trial and error.
Mm.
I think this goes back to, I think this would be my advice based on some of the stuff we were talking earlier. And I did ask you a loaded question earlier, Karen, about whether
Mhm.
this could be done without someone curating it. And in
Mhm.
my experience, it falls apart pretty quickly. Like even if you've
Yeah.
set up an information architecture in your SharePoint or your Google Drive, without somebody who knows that SharePoint like the back of their hand, all of that just, people just do their own thing. And then
Yeah.
you know that the information is in there and you can't find it.
Mhm.
Or it's
Yeah.
buried so deep, or it was from 3 years ago or 10 years ago or what have you. So I think for this question too, this may be something where as a priority, you would say someone in our organization is going to semi-manually create that newsletter that's going to go out with those resources because it's important enough to us and to our community that we're going to
Yeah.
put time into
Yeah.
doing it.
And more the first part of Sarah's question, I think the key there is maintaining the information, right? I wouldn't see that as like you have tools that aren't capable of doing this, but maybe that I would guess maybe you don't have the staff capacity to have somebody in charge of it, and so that kind of begs for either chaos or maybe more simplicity. With what information is maintained, so that you only are kind of maintaining what you really have the capacity to manage and keep updated.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot,
Mhm.
about like you often have the tool has the capacity to catalog things, left, right, and center, up, down, and sideways. But are you as an organization ever going to be able to use that information? And if you aren't using it, then why are you spending the time classifying it as you're putting it in, with
Mhm.
those detailed classifications? So that's another thing to consider around prioritizing how people learn and what they need to be learning at your organization.
Yeah,
Because
we
it's
want like
hard
the
when you're like
Goldilocks, just right amount of data.
right, right. But you have somebody at your organization who's spending hours like creating those fields and making sure they're populated correctly. And then somebody just walks in or gets on a Zoom call with somebody and says, "Hey, you're an expert in this piece of what we do. Can I just ask you this question?"
Yeah, yeah. I see Jennifer on this in the chat on this conversation, and so I have for a while thought that Build Consulting, where she works, is so good at this. Like they're so good at internal knowledge management. They've got this thing on Teams that's called the Build Way, and it kind of has like methodologies and like templates and things like that. And I just recently learned that they are trying to kind of reinvent that a little bit. Like they're not satisfied with it. I'm like, but you do it better than anybody.
But they're
So
learning.
yeah, they are
Right,
learning,
they're
and
assessing.
and I think that's a hallmark of a learning organization as well. Is like just because you're pretty good doesn't mean you can't be great. and just always striving to get a little bit better.
Wow, that is a great segue again to go back over our learning objectives for today. So we hope that after being with us for an hour, thank you so much for your time. You were able to learn more about what it means to be a learning organization and why those are advantages to being a learning organization. We shared some of our biggest struggles. I love the person who put time in because, like, absolutely. Learned about some of the different types of tools. We learned more about the categories than specific tools. But again, just please contact us if you have more questions about these. And also on Community IT's website, we have a bunch of articles and resources on some of these different tools, and Build Consulting does as well, and understanding the practices that promote and support being a learning organization. So I hope you were able to take away some of those ideas that we shared with you. And Karen, I just wanted to thank you again so much for joining us today and spending your time with us and all of your expertise. I just loved this conversation. I felt like I learned a lot, and I just want to thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. And thanks for all the comments and chats from people too.
Yes, thank you everyone who spent your hour with us today. We really appreciate it. And now we'll let you go along on your way. Thanks again.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.